Welcome back to From Nine to Mom.
Where we discuss balancing the 9 to 5 hustle with the beautiful chaos we call motherhood.
And today we have a very special guest with us, Eleni Economides from New Intimacy. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist working with couples since 2008. She's had her own private practice. She is a certified sex therapist since 2018. She's also a certified life coach, but I think the real treasure here is that she has been married for 17 years with 3 kids. She has 2 boys and a daughter ranging from 11 years old to 15. So you're in the teen years for sure. And we can't wait to dive in. And thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you. You are my dream job. Like, sex therapy is the job I always wanted for my life, which sounds really weird, but I just think it's such an interesting topic. I talk about it too much, probably. So we are really excited for your perspective being the professional. And I just think that the first question I have is, what got you into this career path and what really made you passionate about working specifically with women and couples?
Well, it depends how back to the past you want to go, but I think the reason has evolved. I've wanted to go into family therapy because I grew up without my parents. My parents were divorced. I grew up with my grandparents, and I've always felt that impact of back in the day of a broken family, right? So I wanted to help families work through that. And as I grew and evolved in a different stage in my life, I took on that specific area of life to learn how to help people through. So as I was going through my own transitions and struggles, let's call it became the thing that I focused on to help with people. So I became a marriage and family therapist. I worked with families as I entered the stage where I was now looking to get married and I was having this relationship with a spouse. I was encountering my own kind of difficulties. And then that became the focus of who am I going to help? How that can help me? What do I know that can help others? So it has continued to evolve from there. And then the sex therapy part is also coming through my own personal development and evolution but also definitely my work with couples. That's what led to that interest.
And I think one of the things we have to nail down too is, so what is sex therapy? Like, what are you talking to your clients about day in and day out? Or what type of people are you working with?
That's a great question. And I think it's going to lead to understanding a little bit as to why I added coaching.
Yeah.
Because, I think everybody really knows what therapy is, but sex therapy is talk therapy for sexual issues, right? So specifically, sex therapy is designed to help people that experience sexual dysfunction, whether they're male or female or non-binary. Maybe it is premature ejaculation, delayed ejaculation, difficulty becoming aroused or experiencing pleasure, sexual pain, sexual anxiety, right? So something quote unquote like a disorder, right? Or if there is a medical condition that's interfering with someone's sexual functioning. It's sort of looking at that area of life, but it's talk therapy. There's no touching involved.
So it's not like Meet the Fockers where they're all like all over the yard doing...
No. But it's so much more that happens in sex therapy because people that come with those concerns and issues, what it boils down really is our sexual development and education that we received and how perhaps inaccurate or misleading that has been, that causes us to have this, belief system around sex. And our gender, whether we're male or female, and what the expectations that society has from us are, that's causing a lot of this issue. Usually there's anxiety behind all sexual dysfunctions.
Yeah, that's such a good point, though. I never really thought about it in the way of how we were raised about all these other things, right? We always say like, oh, I was raised with this type of parenting, or I was raised with this, but we were all raised with a certain subset of beliefs around sex and what our role in sex is and what it's supposed to look like or be like. And I think that's talking about it is not always, my family is a little too open probably for some, but I think that most people don't talk about it a lot. So sitting in a safe space with you probably opens doors and can break down some of those old barriers that mentally are probably leading to some of those physical I would assume, challenges.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you would be surprised the things that people believe as true when they start to sort of meet with me. It's hard to let go of the things that we have believed for so long as true about sex or what sex should look or be like. And it really is helpful to kind of start getting a more of an accurate perspective and education on the topic and kind of let loose of some of those like old false beliefs that make it so difficult to enjoy
Yeah.
sex.
And I think one of the reasons Danielle and I wanted to talk to you too, especially record today's episode, was talking about new moms. This is such a heavy topic for new moms, which is a lot of our listeners out there. And I think the number one thing, like Danielle and I have talked about in our friend circle with each other, is sex after kids is just so difficult. And it's hard sometimes to like get back into the swing of things. And both of us we're starting to get out of the newborn stage, but I know a lot of our listeners are in the newborn stage, and we'd be remiss if we didn't get some advice from you today. So what is making it so difficult after kids, and what are some things that we can start becoming more aware of to start easing up on ourselves?
I don't think I'm going to say anything new here. There's something that you or your listeners don't know, right? How longer the to-do list becomes.
Yeah.
When you have a newborn or a toddler or a child, the to-do list is so much longer, and that increases your stress levels, decreases the time that you have available for yourself. It just makes it so you're mentally less available for anything else other than attending to these little humans' daily needs, right? It's no surprise,
Yeah.
especially if you're breastfeeding, you are going to be exhausted. So we know all of this, right? Your listeners know this, that big part of what makes it so difficult is the change in the daily, the demand of daily life on you as a mother. The changes for your partner as well, if they're male, but if you're a female, for sure, you're going to be the one that's having to do more. But having a baby on you or a toddler being touched out and just not having the personal space that you used to have before you had a baby, it's going to make it less likely that you're going to have more touch time.
That's
Makes
totally
sense.
true, because I'm also somebody, I am just like not a touchy-feely person. And then when the kids are touching me all day, as soon as my husband touches me, I'm like, stop, leave me alone. I need to just sit here by myself for a minute. But it's so true, though, that you could be touched out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's like I am a touchy-feely. Katie and I laugh about this all the time, but I am a touchy-feely person. I want to be like touched at all times, like, but in a loving way, like from my husband or my kids. Like I want cuddles and snuggles and love. And if my kids are giving it to me, I think that sometimes leads to not enough time for my husband to give that to me, or opportunity, or like even a little bit of jealousy of like how much I'm loving on the kids. And then when it's really time, because then it's time to love on someone else. And I'm not even over touched. It's just, there's no time left to be touched by anyone else. Does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense, right? The kids become the recipients of where we receive affection from, so our tank is full. And where we give our affection, the one that, where we get our bonding and this kind of high that comes from closeness.
Yeah.
So then you have less need for that, whether to give it or take it from another person.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think so we did ask our followers on Instagram if they had any questions. And one question that just came to mind while we're talking about this was how to have the energy again. And one of our listeners made a joke, like, am I supposed to shotgun a Red Bull and then like want to be with my husband, or like, where am I going to get the energy to just be ready?
How do we get the time, energy, and emotional feeling that like this is sexy time and I feel sexy during sexy time? Like we've all gone to bed with the messy bun, mascara under your eyes, milk leaking through your bra, like your granny panties still on from, postpartum. And then you're like, you want this? I don't want this. Like, you want this? So I think that is like a big question: time, energy, and I don't know, feeling back.
Yes and yes. So yes, being touched out and having, less time and a longer to-do list is one of the things that makes it less likely or makes it more difficult to want sex after you have kids. but also you just started talking about the changes that we're experiencing. I mean, we didn't really get into it, but you're talking about less time for self-care, right? But also the changes that our body is going through and the transition. And of course, there's the hormonal changes that happen in the postpartum period, but also our body changes through delivery and pregnancy. So a lot of women at this time experience kind of body image issues that makes it less likely for them to want to be naked. I mean, that's a
Yes.
big transition. And there is a grief process that comes with that, letting go of your old kind of body and learning to love your new body and all that it has offered, right, to the world with through your kids, and allowing, because our partners usually, they go through that transition too, but they are easier to adjust to it than we are.
For sure.
We are more resistant to the idea that this might be our new body and it's okay and let's love it anyways. So I don't know if I took you in a different direction with talking about this body image, but the reason why we don't want to have sex with right after kids is it's not just not having enough time for self-care or being touched up. It's also having this different body, and also it's kind of not knowing how to ask for help. A lot of us, we tend to want to do everything ourselves because either we were taught that we shouldn't ask for help, or that we have this kind of need to do things a certain way, a little bit of a
Not
perfectionism
Katie
inside
and I.
us.
Definitely not Katie and I. No way. Just so that's totally us.
So when you add something in the mix and we want to do it right and we want to do it the right way and the best way, and if we think that the best person to do that is us, then we don't delegate. We don't ask for help, which of course is going to make the anxiety and the stress even higher. Yeah, our libido does not like high stress. For most women, sometimes it works the other way too. Anxiety, when women experience anxiety, sometimes that triggers sexual desire for them, but most of the time it's the other way around. It's sort of like your desire goes because you go in a kind of a little bit of a fight or flight, and when you're in fight or flight, you don't have time for sex.
Even if you do have time, you don't, because in your mind you're doing all these.
Yes, because you're thinking like, I gotta do this and I gotta do that, and I can't relax until this and this and this and this is happening.
That's true, because I think that sometimes we've all been laying there, and if you haven't done this before, you're lying, where you're like trying to make that time like fun and enjoy it, but in the back of your mind you're like, oh, but I have to send the permission slip tomorrow. I forgot that it's dressed like a character book day on Thursday. Did I shut the door to the car like before like coming in the house? Like we're thinking about all these things that we still have to do even while we're trying to think of that, be in that moment, and it takes you back. And I feel like for women, and maybe I'm wrong, but everyone that I've talked to, sex is very emotional and mental as well. Like getting to that point is emotional and mental, and when your mind's in 8,000 different spots, it's hard to like get there where you need to be. And it's not your spouse's fault, but it's like that invisible workload just constantly running through your mind, and it's hard to turn it off. And I feel like that makes me think I have no time, even though I probably have time in that moment. I just need to stop thinking about snack tomorrow.
Certainly that's, learning how to quiet your mind could be a skill that maybe you didn't have much before you had kids, but now that you have kids, it's a lot more obvious that you don't know how to quiet your mind because there's so much more to do and everything is swirling in the background. So learning to do that is a skill. I mean, nobody really teaches you how to quiet your mind and how to learn how to be present. And of course, nowadays, there's actually a lot of teachings about mindfulness and how to be more in the moment. What you're also presuming now, see, this is my topic of interest. So another thing that could make it so likely that at this time of our lives, we don't want to have sex. I'm not saying that this is your listeners or you, but from my experience when I work with women, I have seen this come up quite often, right? That having a baby or a child is a very good reason why a woman doesn't have time for sex, especially when sex doesn't feel good to her.
Yeah.
If sex hasn't felt for the longest time before you had babies, if it hasn't felt good, if it hasn't felt pleasurable, enjoyable, or for some reason there is an anxiety and discomfort around it, then having a baby I don't want to say the word excuse because I don't want to make it sound like women use excuses to not have sex. Are you understanding what it is that I'm trying to say?
No, it makes total sense. It's just an additional thing to add to the list of why you maybe did it. You're
Yeah.
avoiding that, even if
Yes.
that was something you did before.
It's a
So it
living
kind
human
of adds it.
being. So it's like when you
Right.
say like, oh, the baby, like that's what more valid reason. It's not an
Yes.
excuse. It's just
Right. And
a priority.
most of the time, this is an unconscious thing, right? There is
Yeah.
something in our relationships, in our relationship with sex that we haven't addressed. We know we have a discomfort around it or some difficulty, but we pulled through with the new relationship energy and the bonding hormones of a new relationship. They've sustained us, and then we transition into the safety of a long-term committed relationship. The new energy hormones dwindle down, the new relationship energy sort of quietens down, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in this place where we don't have much desire. So having a baby now at this point it's a very good valid reason to not want to think about sex,
Mhm.
and to
Absolutely.
not sort of like to assume that's the reason why you don't want to have sex. But perhaps sex wasn't ever something that you really were into, and now having a baby has become the buffer. So of course those are more like people that I've worked with, so I know it's happening a lot because my sample is biased. Your listeners might not be under that category. Some of
Sure.
them, most of them, I
Yeah,
don't know.
we don't
Sure.
know.
Right. And I think what you were saying kind of goes right into our next question of, some people had a great sex life before kids, and then, if that's not them, and, having the kids gets into a whole different routine of life, and that how do we get back to the place of, pre-kid energy and,
Mhm.
schedules and those types of things? Like, how do you get back to that relationship?
So you see that there's a kind of like two categories, right? If the decreased in sexual frequency and sexual desire that happens after a couple has a child can become an opportunity to deal with the issues that were there from before and get the help we need to repair that relationship with sex, right? So that's one thing that requires more like an in-depth work, that you will need help to work with someone.
Yeah.
But if that is not the case we're talking about, then we're describing more like, how do you learn to have grace for yourself during this period of adjustment and transition, instead of turning against yourself and using it against you or against your partner for wanting to be intimate, right?
Hmm.
Your question was, how do we get back to the place where we were before kids? Well, one pathway is through having grace for what has changed and then learning to develop a more flexible sexual style. What I mean by that is, maybe we are used to sex looking a certain way, right? He initiates, he says, "You want to have sex?" And you're like, "Okay, let's go have sex." And then you jump in bed, and that means intercourse. But maybe now intercourse is not so easy or available for you. Maybe your time is limited, maybe you don't feel good in your body, but maybe there's other things that you can do and enjoy with your partner instead of intercourse. So how can you broaden your sexual repertoire? Maybe that's a better word instead of sexual style. To start understanding of sex as something more than intercourse, something that you could use to not just give an orgasm or get an orgasm, but to be playful together and have fun and sort of like, I don't know, roll around naked and goof around, instead of telling yourself that sex should look a certain way. And if you don't want to do that, then there's something wrong with you and your partner is not going to want to be with you. And what if they go and cheat? And what if they, knowing the woman's mind? What's
Yeah.
that?
It's spiraling. You spiral
Yes,
out of control.
spiraling. It's spiraling, right? And then we feel frozen all of a sudden. We don't know what to do. And we get either resentful or hopeless and kind of desperate, not knowing how to handle it.
No, I think that's a good piece of that. And sometimes it becomes, you avoid all of that, like you're saying, like just being more playful and just touches here and there or whatever it may be. Sometimes you just go into, a lot of people call it like roommate mode when you're with your
Mm-hmm.
partner with your kids, and you're taking turns cleaning, you're taking turns doing this. And like, I mean, there's so many times during the day that Ryan will just like walk by and he can't walk past me without touching my butt. It's just not something that is like, he can't get past it. But when he does it, it's like, all right, it makes me feel good. And that's so like
Mm-hmm.
just simple things like that gets you kind of back into,
Until your
a good
child
headspace.
starts slapping your ass in public, because now Jordan's the same way, and I have to coach my people think we're a sick, twisted family because Colton will run around Marshall's and then slap my butt, and I'm like, you can't do that here. That's for daddy only. Like, don't do. It's like, but Katie, it does make you feel good. It's like a little thing that's like fun and
Right.
playful. But then you got to be careful because then your kids are like, oh, that's a fun game. Like, no, that's for mommy
Oh,
and daddy only.
they repeat everything. So they'll be like, what are you guys talking? Like Jack will still, my 3-year-old is asking, what are you guys talking about? Oh, nothing. You don't get it yet.
Not yet, soon enough.
Not yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so true. But yeah, it's just, little things that like make you start feeling more connected. And
Mhm.
in my relationship, at least, it's typically initiated from him of all the,
If
just,
you are open to that playfulness, right?
yeah.
If you can think of yourself as able to have this sexual playfulness and this sexual flexible style, then him slapping your butt, it's not he wants to have sex. You don't have to shut it down right away by saying, can't you see I'm busy, or giving him a dirty look, or doing something to shut it down, right? That indicates that there is more sort of like space in the sexual relationship for more playfulness, right? And that diffuses the anxiety and the tension. If that slap on the butt is perceived as a sexual initiation, that means he wants to have sex. And how can you want to have sex? Can he see I'm busy? Can you da 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 da? Then couples start to struggle. They don't know how to handle that tension, right? And then they go to extremes. So that's a good example of what it means to have a flexible sexual style, or to more variety, right? Doesn't have to, all sexual acts or sexual behaviors don't have to lead to intercourse. It's okay if they're just that. You don't have to take it to the next step, and allowing yourself, and of course talking with your partner, right? And asking for some understanding and sharing your experience of how life has changed for you, without trying to blame them. They haven't really done anything to create that for you. It's a very natural and unavoidable part of having a child, but leaning into connection and safety, like this is your person, right? They don't want you to be moody and suffer. They want to be there for you, and to be able to communicate your struggle to them, I think creates the safety that you need to kind of be able to relax and not take things too seriously
And
in
Katie,
those
I
moments.
think you and I are lucky in that aspect, even though we deal with sex and talk about sex externally differently. I think that we both have good communication with our partners previous to having kids. So I know for us, it's might be a little different, but I know people who I know are friends that I've talked to where it's like they weren't. It was like more like, this is just what we do. And now there's a big sense of guilt when they don't want to do it. Like you're saying, like you have to be more flexible. Like what if the woman is willing to be more flexible, but they're still carrying around the guilt of not wanting to do all of it, or not feeling comfortable telling their partner no? Like what are some strategies that they can use, if that makes sense?
I want to understand your question better. Can you reward it? Like
Yeah. So
what are
Katie
you?
and I have no problem. I feel like we're direct people. We've been that way in our relationships. Like we talk with our spouses, like TMI, sorry, mom and dad, but Jordan and I had a long distance relationship for a long time. So like talking and communicating was a big deal, even around this topic. So like I don't feel as much guilt because I've always communicated, but I know some of my friends feel guilty bringing up what they want, or like that mom guilt, like, oh, I don't have the space, but I don't know how to tell him I don't have the space because of all the things you said.
And feeling guilty for saying no.
Yes.
And like they're feeling guilty for shutting down any initiation from their partner.
So how do you
and they don't know how to vocalize that.
What's a starting point?
Well, the feeling is not the problem. Meaning, it's okay if you're willing to say no when you know you're not into something. So women either choose to say yes and feel resentful, or say no and feel guilty when they think they're doing something wrong.
That goes to everything. Yeah.
Right? When we think we've done something wrong, we feel guilty. Now, a lot of women, they don't want to feel guilty. So they end up saying yes to things they don't want to do. And then they get mad at the other person and they feel resentful. Okay. That is, obviously not good for you and the relationship. But now you're talking about, I guess, what are some ways to reduce the guilt? Well, I mean, I'm not sure how to answer this question because there's no way to reduce the guilt other to give yourself permission to not want it and to understand that that's okay, right? But because we tend to be people pleasers, women, like we're raised to be caretakers and to want to keep everyone happy, when we think that we're not making everyone happy, we start to feel bad. And that's a learned sort of like behavior from our socialization. So a way to not feel guilty is to see for yourself that that is not your job to make other people happy. Like other people's happiness is not your responsibility. That doesn't mean you should be indifferent or not care about what other people want and need, right? But where do you set the boundary? That's the work for, if you want to feel less guilty, then the work is to learn how to have better boundaries. Meaning, what do you allow yourself to, how much to do or not do? Where is the bottom line of self-sacrifice versus being available for someone else and their needs? Am I answering your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
we talk about boundaries all the time as like people, but not necessarily with sex, right? Like it's not something we all talk like, well, I set a boundary today in my household about sex. Like we don't say that often, but we are always like, I'm setting boundaries with what I like am accepting in my life or work or whatever. Just a different way to look at it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're ready to break down the boundaries, Katie, I'm asking the question because I think that this is something that is important to a lot of people is you're ready to go back into it or you're like trying hard, you're ready to jump back in, you want to get back into it. What are some things you can do to get back into it? Like, I don't want to be the couple that schedules, say, Tuesday nights, like you see the sitcoms, every Tuesday night. How do you get back into it and start to enjoy it again? What are some tricks you have up your sleeve for women after kids to get back into it and start to really enjoy it again?
Well, I personally don't have a problem at all with scheduling it, right? There's nothing wrong with scheduling it, whether it's in your mind for yourself or with your partner, right? If scheduling it or putting it on the calendar together, meaning both of you agree on a date and time to have sex because it feels unnatural or whatever, then you don't have to do it that way. If you know that sex is important to you and your relationship and you want to keep it alive, then it starts with actually a decision to keep it alive and a decision to initiate it a specific time and a specific date. You don't have to share with your partner when you're planning to do that, but certainly like you've always planned for sex. Even when sex felt natural and easy, it was always planned. You knew that it was going to happen. You wanted it to happen. So you were preparing, you were showering, grooming, all the stuff that you did, right? Back in the day, you were wearing your nice lingerie, whatever. Some women wear that, others don't wear underwear at all.
I went through all the phases, right?
It's scheduling. We don't think of it as scheduling sex because the spontaneous desire, the horniness is higher at the beginning of the relationship. But in reality, we've always scheduled sex. And that allowed for the anxiety to be low because we were prepared. We were shaved. We smelled good. We felt clean. We didn't have anything to worry and distract our mind in that moment. So if you do want to bring sex back, I think it starts with, when do I feel good in my body and with myself? I feel the best when I'm clean, when I feel, I don't know, when I had a manicure and a pedicure, when I put moisturizer on my body, when I had a lot of water in me, right? With this kind of self-care. Because when you feel good physically and mentally in yourself, chances are you're going to have space available. You're going to want to share yourself with another person. If you don't feel in your body, you're not going to want to share yourself with another person.
Saying scheduling sex like that is a different way to look at it because we do that, right? Like that's so true. Like back in the day, you'd be like, oh, it's like, we're going here, we're going out of town. You pack your best lingerie. Like you're planning it you didn't plan like, oh, at 6 o'clock on this evening, we're going to do this. But in your head, like you said, like you got a wax, you brought your lingerie, you had new perfume, or you even wear your husband's favorite perfume or whatever. And that is such like a unique perspective, because I do feel we all feel better. Everybody's is different. Like I like lingerie. Some people don't. Some people like the t-shirt and boxers, but like whatever that is for you, in your head, you are always scheduling it for yourself, not necessarily on
Correct.
a calendar. So finding that space to do that for yourself when you know that there's a possibility puts you in control a little bit too. Nobody wants to be caught with a unmatching bra and panties on date number 3 or whatever it was, right? So like, why don't we do that now with our spouse?
And
Makes
then
sense.
you can, also like, I mean, be prepared, have your lube and have your cleanup stuff around you, easy access to stuff that you know you're going to need if you decide to initiate sex, so that you don't have reasons to kind of worry or kind of be in your head if you decide to initiate intimacy, right? Just know what you're going to need and increase your chances of success for a good time together versus extra distractions.
Because there are plenty of those.
I think that's a huge factor, though, is the extra distractions of things that, are around and being ready all the time. Because how many times is it like, I haven't showered in 3 days. How could we have sex right now? I need to go I need to go take a shower. And it can be so hard. But when you feel ready to get back to that spot, you kind of know. I mean, my youngest is 18 months and I'm like, I'm just to the point where we consistently can take a shower and I can shave my legs. Like, we're just back to that spot. So it's a battle to get back to it, but it does come around.
Yeah.
Those time-saving measures, like you're saying, like kind of always be ready, like have your toolkit, kid-safe toolkit close by.
Yes, yes, I do have a safe box in my nightstand where I have a key for, and it's there when I need to. I have easy access to it, but it's also safe. Kids cannot get into it. So it increases our chances of, if something naturally comes up, then we don't have to kind of say, oh, no, we can't do this because we don't have lube, or we don't have this, or we don't have that. But also, since we're talking about moms and young kids, and I think it's important to really like know what's going to work for you and your family and your kids. I find, some families do not do screens or TV at all. But if you do, that can be the time where you know that your child is going to be busy, right? And you can use that time to connect with your partner. Again, it doesn't have to be full-on intercourse, right? It doesn't have to be for like an hour and a half or 45 minutes. It can be for 15 minutes when you know that your kid is watching, I don't know, oh my gosh, is it possible? Oh, Curious George, that I forgot. That you can tell yourself, like, this is the time for me to go play with my spouse. I'm going to use the built-in babysitter without having to worry in my mind, what's the kid doing? What's the kid doing? Are they getting into trouble? Are they sort of like, if you have access to little breaks like this for you in the middle of the day, use them to kind of connect with your partner in a way that's going to allow you to be present in that moment because there's less distraction.
It's a new use of screen time. Well, thank you so much for Eleni for coming on and talking to us about this. I've been talking to everyone about the fact that we were having you on this podcast. I, in all seriousness, think this topic is something that we all talk about. And I honestly think that we talk about it more than men do. So having someone that's a professional that's dealt with this and can understand, come on and give us the what's up, I think has been so beneficial to us, but also to our listeners. So thank you again so much for coming. I could talk about sex all day, but apparently we have 9-to-5 jobs. So thank you again. With that, we're going to clock out from the podcast and back into our 9-to-5.
And if anyone is looking to get in touch with Eleni at New Intimacy, we will have all of her information linked in the description of this. And you can go ahead and reach out to her. She does virtual appointments. She is based here in Rochester, New York, and there is an office here. We know we have a lot of listeners in Rochester, so make sure you guys check her out and give her page a follow.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for having me.